is Beverley Sunderland, Managing Director at Crossland Employment Solicitors. Beverley, good evening and welcome to GB News.
Good evening, Nigel. Thank you for inviting me on.
Now, just on the legal side of this to begin with, is there any precedent in employment law in this country for private companies or the state insisting that their staff fulfil certain medical requirements, including having vaccines?
It's a fairly wide question. I'm not aware of any. I have to say that it has been bandied about that surgeons, it's compulsory that they should have vaccinations against hepatitis. But actually, I don't believe that it's actually mandatory. I think it is recommended. So in answer to your question, I'm certainly not aware of any. But now a law has been passed, and certainly in relation to care home staff, and as you have said, most likely coming in respect of NHS staff. And that's something of a game changer.
And does the employee have any rights in this situation, or do they simply have to comply or lose their job?
Well, one of the fair reasons for dismissing an employee is if it is unlawful to continue to employ them. Now, if they are working in a care home, they are a care assistant, they can't do anything else, there isn't another job for them, the employer has really got no option. They are going to have to terminate their employment. Now, in the olden days, they might have gone to Europe and complained that the laws had been implemented and that they were contrary, say, to EU directives on discrimination. Now their only hope would be to go to the European Convention on Human Rights, which of course we are still part of, and complain that it is contrary particularly to Article 9, perhaps freedom of thought and conscience and religion. So really that's their only option.
Yeah, well, I mean, the whole point of Brexit, I guess, Beverley, is that we make our own laws, whether they're good laws or bad laws, but we make our own laws, and in a sense, you back that up. So it seems to me, with the care sector, that what was done was the attempt, and there are, whatever it is, 10, 12, 15% of the country who just do not want to take this vaccine. Some of them don't want to take any vaccines. And it's unlikely that that core of people are going to change their mind, even if they're bullied, because the attempt to bully people in the care home sector simply hasn't worked, has it?
Well, let me just take you back a step. I don't think I accept the word bully. And picking up on your introduction to this particular topic, and you were saying, well, you can still pass it on, but there is now Public Health England research which shows that even after a first jab, you are between 38 and 45% less likely to pass it on to someone else. Okay. So it's got to be a balance of risk. When we've had 14,000 people die in our care homes, we have to do all we reasonably can, in my personal belief, to make sure that our elderly are protected.
I understand the point you're making. I mean, it was Boris Johnson, in fact, the Prime Minister last week, that said having the jab doesn't mean you can't catch COVID, doesn't mean you can't pass it on. But if there is a substantially reduced risk of that, well, then I'm pleased to hear it. The reason I use the word bully, Beverley, is, if I say to you, do as I say, I believe this is right, or you will lose your job, I don't think bullying is an inappropriate use of a word, do you?
Well, I think that if you were to say that without it being against a backdrop of a global pandemic with millions dying, with hard statistics which now show that actually you reduce the risk if people are vaccinated, then I think put in that light, it is a different question, really, isn't it? Because what government are saying, and don't get me wrong, I don't agree with everything that the government says, but yep, I do agree with this particular law, because if this was my mother or my father in a care home, I would want to know that absolutely everything had been done to stop the risk. They're not going to stop it completely. So I don't think that you can look at it in isolation.
No, OK, that's a very, very fair point. Beverley Sunderland, thank you for coming on and making it. Well, let's go from the legal side of this argument to the front lines. I'm joined now by Tony Stein, Chief Executive of Healthcare Management Solutions, which operates around about 70 care homes across the UK. Tony, good evening and thank you for joining me.
Good evening, Nigel. Thanks for inviting me.
So I'm fascinated by this. You know, everyone's told it's the law, it's coming into effect, and still people either leave the industry, your industry, or simply refuse to get the vaccine. I mean, it hasn't really worked, has it? This government ploy hasn't really worked, and my concern is, with the National Health Service, we'll finish up by April, short of nurses, short of staff.
Well, OK, I think we need to go back a step. I mean, COVID's been a journey for us all. We've learnt a lot throughout the last 2 years. The evidence and the information available has changed. We took a view quite early on that we would have preferred for us not to have had a mandatory vaccination policy for existing workers. We believe that the individuals had the right to choose. We adopted a policy of signposting and educating and so on. So to try and encourage people to look at the right information from the right sources and make their own reasoned decision. You know, our workers aren't stupid. They're very intelligent people. They're quite capable of assessing risk. And we believed at the time that they would choose probably to go down the route of taking the vaccination. And before it was even mandated, we'd achieved somewhere in the region of 90% vaccination amongst our care home staff group. So we had a very, very high rate of take-up anyway. And when the evidence came out that actually, if you were double vaccinated, you were less likely to be transmitting the disease, less likely, not it wasn't possible, but you were going to be less likely to transmit it, then actually we hoped that everybody would take it up. We have around about 2,000 staff in our English care homes, and only 23 of those by the 11th of November won't be double vaccinated.
OK, that's a very small percentage. And as far as those 23 are concerned, you simply can't use them anymore.
No, unfortunately not. Again, I think when you get down to levels like that, our view would have been that we could have taken alternative actions, such as maybe getting them to continue to wear PPE and continue to test them and so on to protect our residents. I think the issue, though, Nigel, is a bit of a red herring. And the issue really is that this on its own is not the problem for us. We've had a staffing problem in the care sector for decades. I've been in this business for 20 years now, running care homes, and we've always had problems recruiting staff. And I think it's got its roots in a number of things, but the primary one is that actually working in care is misconceived as a sort of dead-end job, low-paid job, not valued by society. And I think we failed our children over the last 2 decades, 3 decades, by not teaching them the true value of vocations. You know, I think these people, we were clapping on our front doorsteps, if you remember, banging pans because of the incredible work that these people were doing. And yet, you know, they're still effectively a minimum wage job, and that shouldn't happen. And you know, I think this is the root of it. This is just one issue that's added to a lot of others. It's not the root of the problem.
No, and of course the root of the care home disasters that happened in some cases was, of course, the hospitals being emptied, insufficient checks being done. On balance, Tony, people have left the sector, but on balance, do you think the law is the right law?
I think it possibly is. I mean, as I said, I'd have preferred not to do it. We're there now. It will have an impact. We just have to live with it. But I think what we need to do as a society is we need to refocus away from this onto some of the core issues, start to value our carers, pay them the right wage, and you know, we could move on and maybe help to fix that staffing crisis that we're all about to hit.
Tony Stein, thank you very much indeed. Well, you've heard the arguments, the legal arguments, the practical arguments. I still feel very uncomfortable with a society that divides people up into the jabbed and the jab-nots, but that's where we are.